We simply don't know what caused it. However, everybody up and down the line, Washington, New York, everywhere says, the FBI says no terrorism involved. So there has been a massive power blackout in U.S. and Canadian cities late in the day today. It closed nuclear power plants in Ohio and New York State. It drove workers here in New York City and Toronto into the streets, shutting subways in blistering heat. And of course, people in the high buildings in a place like New York had to walk down. That takes time to get people up from the subways. New York's Governor George Pataki declared a state of emergency and said officials thought the cause of the blackout, and I quote this now, was a possible transmission problem from Canada to the U.S. No sign of terrorism. A senior law enforcement official speaking on condition of anonymity said the FBI determined the blackout was, quote, a natural occurrence and there's no evidence of terrorism. The Homeland Security Department has agreed in succeeding minutes and hours. Subways, elevators, airports, including John F. Kennedy and LaGuardia airports affected. No problem with safety in the skies. The problem at the airport is basically with the power off in the airport, among other things, they can't put travelers through the security system. So if you're wondering about what's going to happen at the airports, let's go to Washington and CBS News correspondent Cheryl Atkinson, who has some information on what's happening with the nation's airway system. Cheryl?
Well, Dan, as you say, the FAA has reported safety and order in the skies over America, but that doesn't mean there hasn't been a disruption in air traffic, and there's been a significant disruption to and from the Northeast, causing delays across the country. Because of the power outage, as you mentioned, Dan, a number of airports have lost power and the ability to screen passengers. They also can't fuel the airplanes or move the airplanes. Because of that, the flights out of the three New York airports, Kennedy, LaGuardia, and Newark, have all been held on the ground, as well as flights at Cleveland, Hopkins, and Toronto. And also across the country, flights, of course, scheduled to go to those airports are being held on the ground, and that's had sort of a snowball effect delay across the country. The FAA does say it's still in business at all the air control centers. Some of them in the Northeast are running on backup diesel power generators, but they're still running. Along the trains from Amtrak, they say Penn Station in New York, as you might expect, is shut down with no trains coming in or out of there. We also have a new statement from the Treasury Department here in Washington about the state of the financial systems. Treasury says the U.S. financial system is extremely resilient. Power went down after the markets closed. The information from Treasury is that market participants and exchanges were able to shut down in an orderly manner. When we asked if the markets would be opening normally tomorrow, as usual and on schedule, we couldn't get a response to that yet. They're not ready to say whether the markets would go ahead as normal tomorrow. Dan?
Cheryl Atkinson reporting from Washington. If you're asking yourself how long is this going to last, the candid answer is no one can say for sure. Now, people in elected political office, it's in their DNA to be optimistic. And the most optimistic prospects for getting the power back on in at least some pockets is on the order of an hour and a half or say 2 hours. However, you want to keep in mind that when the power went out, something similar to this, not nearly this widespread, in 1996, it was 25 hours before full power was on everywhere that had been affected. Now, the last massive power outage in the United States was August 11, 1996. The power was out from Oregon down to San Diego, California, and as far east as Texas. That particular outage lasted as long as 10 hours in some affected locations. When I said it lasted as long as 25 hours, that was by some estimations. But it's not to say this is going to last 10 hours. It is to say no one can tell you for sure when the power is going to be back on. That Mayor Michael Bloomberg here in New York is optimistic that maybe, just maybe, a lot of the power can be back on before dark. Now, dark would be about an hour and a half from, about 2.5 hours from now. Sunset is roughly 7:56 Eastern Time tonight here on the East Coast. And of course, then you go from the official sunlight into the twilight gray area, and it gets dark about 9 p.m. So some of the power could be on hour and a half, 2 hours from now, but for all of the power to be back on in this whole widespread area, the current outlook is it's going to take longer than that. It'll be some hours. How long, no one can fully say. Mika Brzezinski, CBS News correspondent, is on the street at Columbus Circle. Mika, what do you see? What do you know? What do you don't know?
Well, Dan, at first when this all started to happen and people were pouring out into the streets, people were really scared. I mean, they really were wondering what was going on and thinking the worst. Now people are pretty calm. There's a good mood in the air as people are just walking to where they have to go. If you look down the street, this is the story. We're at Columbus Circle right now where there's a police command center set up. This is the story that's taking place across the city of New York as people are trying to figure out where they can go. The only way to get around the city at this point, if you don't have a car that can inch around the city, is to go by bus. We've got a bus that's coming this way right now. I want you to take a look at how packed this bus is. The express bus is the only way to get where you need to go, and they are absolutely packed. They're burning hot, and people are crammed in there, as many as they can. They're probably breaking some regulations, but they need to get where they're going to go, and they're trying to get as many people in as possible. The bottom line is a lot of people are coming up and asking us if they know when the power is going to be back on. Nerves have calmed a little bit. People know that they can't really get where they need to go anytime soon. The bridges have, in some cases, closed. In other cases, like the Brooklyn Bridge, they're being used as a pedestrian walkway, so it's just very slow going in and out of the city. The tunnels were jammed. At some point, people abandoned their cars and just walked out because they were nervous about what really was going on. At this point, cops are basically telling people to calm down, stay in an orderly fashion, get where you need to go by foot, or if you can, get lucky, take the express bus. Dan, back to you.
Vika Brzezinski at Columbus Circle. We have on the telephone now the Lieutenant Governor of the state of Ohio, Jeanette Bradley. Lieutenant Governor, thank you very much for being with us. What is the power situation in Ohio at this moment?
Well, we've learned that partial power has been restored to some of our cities in Ohio. Our state emergency management agency is assessing the situation, and we are getting reports from our local agencies that no particular problems have been reported, and we are standing by looking favorably that we'll have power restored.
What are the power officials telling you about what we'll call full or something near power being restored in Cleveland and surrounding area?
They cannot give us a definite time regarding the Cleveland area, and there are other areas as well, but our state facilities are up either on full power or with generator backup, and we are in direct contact with First Energy, our energy providers, and we are making contact with the larger affected cities. So we're continuing that assessment.
And in your opinion, Lieutenant Governor, what are the most important things for people to have in mind as they go through the blackout, the power shortage, for however long it lasts?
Well, right now we want everyone to remain calm, and we are encouraging everyone to not use any appliances unnecessarily, because it will take time. We have been told that it will take time for the power to come back up, and it has to be very slowly. So we want people to remain calm, to know that the state of Ohio, our emergency management assistance is available to any of the areas that may need it, and to turn off air conditioning and unnecessary power outages.
Any thought of calling out the National Guard anywhere in Ohio, Lieutenant Governor?
Our National Guard is part of our assessment project right now. If that is necessary, we are ready to do that. But as the power is coming back on slowly, we don't see that that is an immediate need. But our emergency management officers are in contact with all the local governments, so we will have firsthand experience to know if that is necessary. But now, it is not.
Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Bradley of the state of Ohio, what are you being told? This is encouraging news that the power is coming on in some areas in Ohio. What are you being told? Well, if things continue as they're now going, are we talking about a few hours, several hours, or into tomorrow?
Well, they're saying several hours, but I think in fairness, they are also trying to assess the situation. Toledo and Marion and Akron, those are online or will be back on soon. The large area right now is Cleveland, and they're focused on that. We are receiving periodic updates from First Energy, so we will know immediately when areas are coming back on. And as I said before, we just want people to remain calm, to know that the local governments are in contact with state government, and we're ready to respond in any way that's necessary. Lieutenant
Governor, do you have any inkling this is going to happen? Had there been any cautionary warnings from power companies or otherwise?
No, we did not.
Thank you very much for being with us, Lieutenant Governor Jeanette Bradley, state of Ohio, coming on to tell us what the situation is there. Now, as those of you who were with us heard, the Lieutenant Governor in Ohio, Ms. Bradley, said that in some areas of Ohio, some, at least little power, is beginning to come back on. Good news, certainly, by any measurement. However, as she also emphasized, in an area such as Cleveland, and this would apply in Detroit, Toronto, New York, in the really big metropolitan areas, no one should get too excited too soon because it's going to take a while. How long is a while? We simply don't know. On the telephone with us now, Michael Gent, North American Electric Reliability Council, has some information about how nuclear power plants have been affected. Mr. Gent, thank you very much. What can you tell us?
I can tell you, Dan, that this area is confined mostly to the Great Lakes area, even though it's a huge area, including several metropolitan cities, as you've been reporting, that are out, like New York City, Detroit, and Cleveland. Other areas of the country that are interconnected with these same areas east of the Rocky Mountains are unaffected. A lot of these plants are relayed offline to protect the plants themselves when we have these giant fluctuations. We don't know what's caused it yet. We're suspicious that the problem may have started in the Ohio area somewhere, and some people are pointing at the Perry nuclear plant as having relayed offline and started this. However, others are looking at the plants in the Niagara Falls area, so we're not sure yet. We're in constant contact with our reliability coordinators across the United States, Canada, and parts of Mexico, and we're trying to piece this together. The problem is that if you take time out to analyze what happens, then you're stealing from the time to restore the system. So our first job is going to be restore the system. And I've been listening to what you've been saying. I think you've got it exactly right. We are saying hours in some cases, several hours in some cases, and undoubtedly we'll run into some situations where some equipment might have been damaged and it's going to take into tomorrow. But we're optimistic that this will be coming back up fairly soon.
Well, we appreciate your candor, Mr. Gent, and if I may say so, I think it's a public service. What you're saying is, look, the power will begin to come on, the sooner the better, but no one should be surprised if in some areas full power everywhere is not on before sometime tomorrow. You're not saying that's going to be the situation, but you're saying we should be prepared for that.
Yes, because we're not sure yet what equipment might have been destroyed in this, how it happened, or where it's going to continue to happen. We're just not sure yet.
Mr. Gent, I really appreciate you being with us. What's the most important thing for people to know? People at home, in the office, wherever, listening to this and saying, well, what do I need to know? What's the most important thing for them to know?
Just what you told them is that there's no need to panic over this, that it'll be back up soon. We still have the finest electric system in the world, and we're going to keep it that way.
Mr. Gent, I made a mistake earlier. In 1996, we had this problem out on the West Coast from Oregon on down towards San Diego, and I believe the power was off, and as far east as Texas, and that power was off for it was 10 hours before full power ever was restored. Then in 1977, one of the more famous or infamous blackouts, it took about 25 hours. Does that history match what you know?
Well, you had it right the first time. The outage in the West was in 1996, and most people were restored after 3 hours. But you're right, the same phenomena occurred. There was some damaged equipment, and it was difficult to get some customers back, and some it took days. But those were, in terms of numbers, very, very few. Of course, if you're one of those, it's very important to you. In 1965, we had the loss of some equipment at Niagara Falls, and it cascaded right down through Pennsylvania and into Virginia, and since that was the first time anything like that had ever happened to us, it took a long time to restore. It took days. But I don't think that this is a situation where we're looking at anything more than hours.
Could be long hours, but you think it'd be a matter of hours?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Michael Gent, thank you so much for being with us.
You're very welcome.
Most helpful. Thanks a lot. You're looking at a live picture from New York City, where a lot of people have had to walk home from work today because the subways are out, the trains are not operating, buses in some cases are operating, in other cases not. The transportation system immediately suffers when you have this kind of massive power blackout. It is not due to terrorism. Everyone in government, local, state, national, includes the FBI, says this has nothing to do with terrorism. It has to do with the enormously complicated greatest electrical power grids in the world. The grid in the northeast United States, this particular one centered around the Great Lakes area, going over toward Niagara Falls and down into New York City. When you place a lot of demand on a system such as that, you can have this sort of thing happening. Mark well, I'm not saying that's what happened today, but that is one of the probabilities with which we deal. And this time of summer, as we said before, once air conditioning, the great demands on air conditioning late in the afternoon, that adds to the problem. But, mark well if you will, we do not yet know what caused this. We believe we know, we've been assured and reassured, and for credibility purposes as independent reporters, we check and double check. It has nothing to do with terrorism. In some few areas, in Ohio, for example, power is beginning to come on. However, as you heard from every authority we've talked to, it may be an hour and a half or 2 hours before there's very much power on in this widespread area, and it figures to be, we can all hope for something better, figures to be beyond that, something beyond the hour and a half or 2 hour mark before full power is on everywhere. And if the past is prologue, it could take as long as 6, 10 hours, maybe as long as 24 hours for the power to come on everywhere and be back to normal. You can help yourself by pulling the plug on your major appliances, because when the power does come back on, whenever it comes back on, you run the risk of a surge, and the surge can destroy some of your appliances. We go now to Cheryl Atkinson for a recap of the situation from the viewpoint of Washington, D.C., which Cheryl still has power.
Dan, we are going to review the important information coming out of Washington, and you mentioned we do still have power in D.C., and the mayor has assured the public here that the electric company Pepco has assured him there isn't a problem on this end. So things are normal in Washington, D.C. Within about an hour and a half of the blackout, there was an official statement being issued by a senior administration official, and that was to say that their preliminary investigation revealed the outage was a result of a power grid failure and not the result of terrorism. The FBI and Homeland Security all came in agreement on that issue. So for some time, they have been talking down the idea that this could be anything other than a natural occurrence or an occurrence outside the realm of terrorism. The Treasury Department has issued a statement late today talking about the financial systems in the United States, saying that there's no issue there either, that the power outage happened after the markets closed today. They were able to shut down the exchanges and the market participants normally. No data was lost. The New York Stock Exchange says for its part it will open tomorrow morning. No word on the other markets as whether they're going to operate normally tomorrow at this point or not. From Amtrak has issued a statement to us saying that the Penn Station in New York is, of course, shut down with no trains going in or out. Passengers who need information are urged to go on the web and try to get more details if they need them. Some of the biggest disruption has happened in the skies. FAA assures us it's not a safety issue, that their air control system is working properly and even on backup power when needed. The problem is that some of the airports are obviously without power, and planes on the ground can't be moved or fueled, and passengers can't be screened. So there's been a significant disruption in the air travel to and from the Northeast. Because of that, the flights going out of the 3 big New York airports, which are Kennedy, LaGuardia, and Newark, are being held on the ground. And of course, that's had a snowball.
They attempted to call on cell phones, but there was sporadic service. Business owners scrambled to save what they could. At this store, they had to go back to the old-fashioned way of keeping food cool, on ice. Jim Acosta, CBS News, New York.
Jim Acosta reporting from here in New York City. We're going to go back to Washington, D.C. now with Cheryl Atkinson. And one reason we're going to go back, Cheryl, first of all, Cheryl, if there's any new information to report, please pass it along. But we heard Bill Plant report that President Bush there in Southern California was going to go ahead with his campaign, re-election campaign fundraiser tonight. But I asked him about Vice President Cheney. So far as Bill said he knew, Vice President Cheney is still on vacation in Wyoming. So Andrew Card, Chief of the White House staff, will be in charge. Any concern in Washington, at least about the appearance of this, that both the President and the Vice President, or if you will, offline, and so the Chief of White House staff is in charge?
No one has said anything about that in particular, and Andrew Card was not the person that spoke to us directly in issuing statements about whether or not this was terrorism and ultimately saying it was not. I think the White House, it appears to us, is trying hard to give the sense of calm rather than a sense of urgency or panic. And it seems as though their standard operating procedure would be to continue with business as usual and everything as originally planned, rather than giving any sort of appearance of disruption, panic, or urgency.
Cheryl Atkinson in Washington, thanks. Most people in the blackout areas have faced aggravating but relatively minor inconveniences. But for health officials, it can be life or death. Erin Moriarty went to see how one New York City hospital faced the emergency. Erin?
Well, Dan, if any good came out of 9/11, it does seem that New Yorkers seem calm and prepared for emergencies. Although there was that moment of panic for people like Synovi Abramson, whose mother was in the middle of kidney surgery at Roosevelt Hospital when the power went out.
But she's very sick, and I'm not even sure she's going to make it through this. I watched her be rolled in personally at 3:30.
At 3:30, and the power went out 45 minutes later.
Right. And he said it would take approximately 40 minutes to an hour and a half. Well, you never know. I mean, who knows? I mean, you're not going to hold anybody to that, but I'm assuming that she was right in the middle of surgery.
But moments later, her mother's surgeon came out.
She's okay, everything went fine. I talked to her dad.
But
She's
what,
fine.
okay.
It actually went out right after. No, she wasn't in surgery.
Right after?
Yeah, the power went out right after we had finished.
Okay.
Thank goodness.
Did you just come out from work?
I just did.
What's the situation in there?
Everything is calm. Seems to be a plan of action. Everybody, the elevators are down. Everybody's taking the stairs, but there's a lot of direction as to where to go.
What I saw today were people acting intelligently and courageously and with kindness and taking care of each other, directing traffic, looking out for one another. It was fantastic.
Roosevelt, like the other hospitals in this city, are on backup power, and they said that they'll be able to handle emergencies as long as they need to.
Erin Moriarty, thanks. Covering what's happening in the hospitals. You are watching combined coverage from CBS News Special Events and the CBS Evening News because of the massive power outages, a blackout, if you will, in a widespread section of the United States, the northeastern section, New York City, Detroit, Cleveland, Albany, Hartford affected some, on well up into Canada, Toronto, Ontario province, said to be still without its basic sources of power. So that's the reason we're on the air with this kind of coverage. A kind of controlled chaos descended on New York City as the blackout spread, overwhelming police and other agents of law and order, at least in the first seconds and minutes of this. But Richard Schlesinger found that many private citizens jumped into the breach.
Kathy Donison is used to telling cranky, rushed people what to do in tough situations. You a police officer?
No, I'm a teacher.
How did you get into this?
I came out, there was nobody directing traffic.
Do you know? Have you ever directed traffic before?
No, I haven't. I teach high school.
Yeah, what's easier? What's easier, that or this?
Hang on.
They seem to listen to you.
A lot of times they don't.
Just like the high school.
Mostly they do. They're amazingly cooperative, and most people are saying thank you. Okay.
79th and Amsterdam, for those who've never been to New York, is one of the busiest intersections in the city.
Hang on. Sam, who I know from my building, came out with me, and then somebody else joined us over there. So that's what's happening.
She has no legal power, but she still has her own kind of authority.
Okay, go. Hurry up, go. Go. Okay, stand right in the middle here.
Okay.
Guys.
She's 52 years old and just had back surgery yesterday, but she's out there keeping her part of New York moving.
I hate to tell you, but you're really in the way now. You have to go.
Oh, we have to go?
Yeah.
You know what? I'm not arguing with you.
Take care.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Richard Schlesinger, CBS News, 79th and Amsterdam.
So we mentioned there was chaos just for a few seconds, maybe a few minutes. Chaos in terms of when you shut down virtually the whole transportation system, subway system, trains, that sort of thing. But a kind of calm descended pretty quickly behind that chaos of people saying, oh, okay, if it's that kind of blackout that is from natural causes, that is something that is not terrorism, which it isn't, then people amazingly and overwhelmingly were filled with the kind of smiles you saw on that woman. Here's a recap of what we know so far and what we don't know about the blackout of 2003, which is continuing at this hour. For how long, no one can say. It may be some hours. At some time after 4 p.m. Eastern Time, a power failure, possibly beginning in northern New York State or Ontario in Canada, triggered a cascading blackout on the power grids. It spread south to New York City and west to Toledo, Ohio, including Detroit, Cleveland, Toronto, and Ottawa in Canada. And when we say it spread down to New York City, there is a theory that it may have started in New York City, but the prevailing theory at the moment is it started either up around Niagara Falls in New York or possibly up in Canada. But all that's conjecture. No one really knows exactly how and where it started on the complicated power grids. Tens, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people initially were trapped in elevators and subways, some of them in the skyscrapers of New York. Millions of commuters faced a rush hour with jammed highways, closed bridges and tunnels, and for many, no way home except on foot. What you see here are pictures of New Yorkers going across the bridge, the Brooklyn Bridge, to get home. The confusion of the early period naturally prompted fears of terrorism, but officials at every level said there is zero evidence of any attack. And that matches what independent reporting of, among others, CBS News, no indication of terrorism, though no one can say for certain just what did happen or just where it started. It's believed to be, as we said earlier, kind of waterfall effect, a domino effect, if you prefer that metaphor, with the giant grid system. That's what put these people on bridges having to walk home. Tonight, New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg says power is beginning to be restored in the city, and he predicted, some would say boldly, but however you see it, he predicted that tomorrow we'll see in New York City business as usual. We'll have to see about that. Power company officials point out that, well, the power may begin to come on in some sections of places like New York. It's already beginning to come on in some sections of Connecticut and some sections of Ohio, but they point out that in the past, to get full power restored everywhere, sometimes usually takes hours, perhaps long hours. Here's the fact. Nobody knows when all of the power will be back on everywhere, although the early indications are that some power is beginning to come on in at least a few places. We're going to go back now to Scott McFarland of WOIO-TV in Cleveland, Ohio. He joins us on the telephone with an update on the power situation in Ohio. Scott?
Dan, two headlines here. The first, perhaps the most important. Cleveland, the city itself, is facing a water crisis if the power stays out much longer. The city's mayor, Jane Campbell, says the city has 2 hours of water left, and really right now there's no sign the water's coming back or the power is coming back on. So this is a problem that's getting worse and worse. She's asking residents to conserve what they have, to unplug appliances and unplug power equipment, obviously, but to save their water, because obviously electricity is needed to pump the water. Without the electricity, they can't pump the water. And we're talking about 1.5 million people who get Cleveland water, not just the city, but these very populated suburbs as well. And we're talking about Akron, Elyria. These are cities that, when you total them together, are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. What is likely the hottest and muggiest day of the year. It's a real bad situation, Dan.
Well, this is an interesting development about the water, frankly, one that had not occurred to me, and I suspected it won't occur to a lot of people in the audience. Scott, for clarity, the situation is you have to have power to pump the water. Is that the reason there may be a shortage in 2.5 hours in the Cleveland area unless something changes?
Absolutely. The electricity is needed to distribute it from the hub, which is right outside of Cleveland. This serves hundreds of miles. If you add it all together, without the electricity, they can't move it. And if the power doesn't come back on soon, the mayor says, we got a water crisis here. And you had mentioned earlier, people in elected office tend to be, either by nature or by genetics, optimistic. This was anything but optimistic from the mayor of Cleveland.
That's Cleveland. I want to emphasize, Scott, and hang on here with us, that Mayor Michael Bloomberg went out of his way, or seemed to go out of his way to say that New York City's water is safe, and extrapolating from that, he believes that there will not be a shortage of water in New York City. Of course, each of these cities has its own particular water system. For example, New York City's water supply begins way up in the Catskill Mountains and comes down sort of through gravity to the city. So we'll just have to see whether this goes on anyplace else. But Scott, what else is happening in the Ohio area that's affected by these power outages?
Well, there is one city, Dan, that really needs to get its power back. That is Sandusky. We have reports from the Cedar Point Amusement Park that there are people trapped on rides. And these aren't rides like you find at the county fair. These are not Ferris wheels. These are among the world's largest amusement park rides. So to be trapped on them is quite an emergency, to say the least. The power outages are so widespread, but it's worth mentioning that many people are trapped in the city. Light rail is down in this area, the light rail that carries people, the commuters, out of the city. That's down. Traffic is a nightmare with traffic lights down, so everybody is kind of trapped in the city center, which makes this whole water situation exponentially worse because nobody can get back out of that water area.
What are the leaders, both local community leaders and the state leaders, telling the population of Cleveland and the surrounding area and elsewhere in Ohio what to expect and what to do?
The best statement, I think, to answer that question came from the Lieutenant Governor. That's Jeanette Bradley. In fact, you spoke with her earlier. She said it's coming on in some areas, including Akron, city of Marietta. Just spoke with Akron Police, though, and they say if the power's back on, we don't know it because they don't have it at the headquarters, and they're still getting so many calls from people reporting the power outages. Many of these firefighters, many of these police officers in these cities are getting flooded with calls from people wondering what's going on, why is the power out. That only slows their reaction, and they certainly do need to react, Dan, to traffic lights out and need to help people kickstart those generators.
Well, you've got how much daylight left in Cleveland? Would you say an hour and a half at this point of daylight?
Not even. I would say about an hour or 10 at this point. And again, this is the hottest, muggiest day we've seen so far this summer.
We're asking this all around. Being a news person in a newsroom, you talk to the police. Do the police have any concern about once it gets dark and if the power is not on virtually everywhere, any concern about looting, rising crime, that sort of thing, Scott?
Haven't had an incident like that in quite a while, not like we saw in Benton Harbor, Michigan. No rioting of that level in this area in quite a while. That hasn't been a concern. Their big concern, I think, Dan, really is the calls. They are calling in backups. The fire departments and police departments throughout our area invariably are calling in backups, extra help to deal with the calls and those traffic lights and generator assistance calls they're getting.
Scott McFarland, thanks a lot there in Cleveland. I was distracted for a moment. We appreciate your help, and we'll be back in touch as we roll along. As our CBS News continuing coverage of this massive power outage in the Northeast United States continues. This includes the knocking out of nuclear power plants, some in New York and Ohio. You say, well, why would a nuclear power plant be knocked out? The reason, as we've stated before, but we state now, they need electrical power to get the nuclear power operating, so that's the reason. Now, we're going to cut away for some of our CBS News stations to have an opportunity to go back to their coverage. We'll continue in a moment for many stations. And this is a special edition, part of CBS News' continuing coverage of the big blackout, the power outage in the Northeast United States of 2003. Much of the Northeastern United States is without power tonight. Millions and millions of people in big cities and suburbs from New York to Detroit and on into Canada, deep into Canada, were caught by surprise in the middle of the afternoon, really going toward late afternoon, when the electrical grid suddenly crashed, stopping everything that depends on electricity to run. Here in New York City, the only thing to do was walk. Workers, those not trapped in buildings or subways, or for that matter in skyscrapers, flooded into the streets trying to make their way home. Now, post-September 9/11, the first thing everybody asked was, is terrorism behind this? And the answer, officials say, is no, and the best of our independent reporting supports that. It's not a case of terrorism. However, no one is yet sure exactly what knocked the power out. CBS News has a team of correspondents deployed to bring you full coverage of this still developing story. We begin here in New York City with Mika Brzezinski. Mika?
Well, Dan, I'm live here at Columbus Circle, where police have set up a command center and they're working to control the crowds which have been milling around the city for the past few hours. Take a look right down the street here and you'll see what's happening across New York City at this hour. People literally have nowhere to go. They have poured out into the street. They poured out in the street when this first went down, and they have been walking around ever since. Some with somewhere to go, trying to get home, others looking for a way to get home. A lot of people have been asking us what's going on, when this is going to clear up. There have been some concerns for people in terms of heat exhaustion. Water bottles are being passed around. There is some good news. Some self-service is back in service for some people. That right there is the best way to get around right there. The bicycle, that person's probably making a lot of money today. I've seen a few of those. Otherwise, the only way to get around is the express bus service. And those buses are jam-packed with people because that is the only way around the city. Bridges and tunnels are jam-packed. There's not a lot of access in and out of the city. And a lot of people were extremely tense when this first happened. We caught up with some people who were stuck on the subway.
The next thing you know, we had to get out the train, walk through the tunnel and all that. And then no cabs want to stop us. They don't want to take us uptown. So I guess we just stuck here.
I think it's very scary for the city. It's very congested. No lights are going on, and the traffic is going on. It's very dangerous. We really don't know what's going on.
Could be worse.
Subway service is still stopped at this point, but traffic actually has been clearing up relatively. Bridges and tunnels are still jammed at this point. How did you get out of the subway? And
well, they let us out by flashlight.
Did you climb out of the window?
Well, we're dealing with live television. We had a little difficulty with Mika Brzezinski's report right there at the end. The essence of that was that people, after initially being surprised, stunned might be the better word, about the power going out, began to deal with it in all kinds of rather calm, collected and steady ways. Everything from, well, okay, if I can't take the subway, I'll just walk across a bridge to go home, to saying, well, I'm stuck in the city, at least for now, and I'll get behind this. This is a massive power blackout. The last time anything approaching this happened was in 1996. And at that time, about 4 million customers in 9 states were affected. One of the most severe outages in U.S. history. That was the one in 1996. Heat, sagging power lines, and unusually high demand for electricity caused that one in 1996. It may turn out it's what caused this one as well. Then there was the blackout in 1997 that left some 9 million people without electricity for up to 25 hours. And then the other marker was the big blackout here in New York City in 1965. After that 1965 blackout, which has become part of the legend of the history of New York, many changes were made in the power grids. The power grids were upgraded all around, and many changes for the better were made. But in 1977 there was another, and then in 1996 there was still another. That one in 1996 happened on August 11th, in this same general time period, if you will. It was the one on the West Coast, went from Oregon on down to California. So while this one is, and we're told and reassured, will be confined to the northeastern part of the United States, this kind of thing can happen when you have a complicated system of power grids as we have in this country. Now, Anthony Mason is here with other information, passing along what you've been picked up on the phone and from our correspondents in the field. What do you know, and what's important for us that we don't know?
Dan, the reports continue to be scattered, but they are coming in from all over the Northeast. In Detroit, Detroit's power company, Detroit Edison, is now telling businesses to shut down tomorrow to take a 3-day weekend. Now, in Detroit, Detroit Edison first heard about the power outage when their own building went dark. The city has been reporting 5-hour traffic delays, and bridges from Detroit to Canada are gridlocked. In Erie, Pennsylvania, rolling blackouts have caused a chaotic rush hour. Even Governor Ed Rendell, who was visiting the city, was stranded in traffic. In Cleveland, University Hospital was operating in disaster mode. No staff could leave. A nurse in the labor room told us they were without air conditioning and, quote, our laboring moms are suffering. In Hartford, Connecticut, power has been flashing in and out. 40 trains in the state were stranded between stations. Akron, Ohio is without power, and 4 nuclear plants in Ohio and New York have been shut down. Every prison in New York State reported a loss of power, and switch to backup generators. Air travel in the Northeast has ground to a halt, causing disruptions across the country. Airports in New York, Cleveland, Detroit, Ottawa, and Toronto have grounded flights, causing a snowball effect of delays. The FAA has said air traffic control centers are still in business, some on backup diesel generators. The problem is, with electricity out at some airports, X-ray machines and scanners aren't working, and it's impossible for screeners to check passengers. Finally, Toledo, Ohio is telling us power is beginning to come back there. The airport is up and running and now taking flights that have been rerouted from Detroit. Meanwhile, outside of Toledo, in Sandusky, Ohio, the blackout froze the rides at the Cedar Point's amusement park. Passengers were just beginning to be evacuated when the cell phone connection to our Toledo affiliate went dead. That's what kind of day it's been, Dan.
And it continues, for that matter. Well, and repeat, if you will, who said and where they said it about businesses closing down, taking a 3-day weekend.
Detroit's power company, Detroit Edison, is now telling businesses in Detroit to take tomorrow off. They're saying take a 3-day weekend. There's a mess to be cleaned up here, and they need people basically to not use the power.
On that note, we go to Alan Schreiber, who's chairman of the Ohio Public Utilities. He's on the phone with us now. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Schreiber. Will power be back on in your state anytime soon?
Yes, sir. In fact, Toledo is back on, we understand. The Akron area is also on its way up and close to being back on. And within the next couple of hours, those power plants that serve the Cleveland area should be restarting. One of them is a nuclear power plant, which did what it's supposed to do, and that shut down.
Because when you have this kind of power outage, it doesn't get the electrical power it needs to create nuclear power.
That's correct. And in addition, some of the power lines, the major transmission lines throughout northern Ohio, have circuit breakers on them, and they shut themselves down too. So without any place to go, naturally some of those plants and some of the coal plants shut down also.
From Cleveland, Scott McDonald from our affiliate station there said that the mayor of Cleveland was saying precautionarily, just as a precaution, that if the power didn't come on in Cleveland in the next 2 hours, I think he said, that Cleveland would face some sort of crisis with its water. Is that true, and what can you tell us about that?
Well, with respect to water, I can't say positively. You would think that there would be some backup plans there. And in any event, it's my understanding that within the next couple of hours, power should be up and running in Cleveland. As I said, they do have power plants that they are firing up right now.
I know that you can only speak for your area, but based on your experience and knowledge, with the power beginning to come on in at least some parts of Ohio now, does this mean or not that very quickly behind that the power will be back on in places like New York City, Toronto, Albany, Hartford?
Well, it's a little difficult to say, Dan, because I think what we've done in Ohio, or rather what the utilities have done, is isolate the system somewhat from the rest of the East and have been able to bring our system up. And it's a matter of interconnecting with those other areas once everything seems to be synchronized. But I know that they have tended to isolate Ohio, the transmission system here, from the rest, and have been able to bring up what they need to. And hopefully that in turn will enable us to interconnect with the eastern part of the states.
Mr. Schreiber, do you expect businesses to be able to reopen across Ohio tomorrow?
My expectation is that they will open. I can't speak for Cleveland exactly. It's a little premature, but if in fact the power comes back up today, I would expect businesses to be up and running.
We really appreciate you being with us. If news breaks out there, being back in touch with you, will you?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Cheryl Atkinson in Washington has an update on what the federal government is and is not doing. Cheryl?
Well, and all of this was happening in other parts of the Northeast. Washington, D.C. was, of course, watching carefully and waiting, but no major outages in the nation's capital. And within about an hour and a half of the blackout, a senior White House administration official issued a statement saying the outage was indeed a result of a power grid failure and not terrorism, which was, of course, was the first thing that sprang to the minds of many people, understandably so. The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security quickly concurred that terrorism was not involved, and so there was no change in the national alert level. It remained at yellow or elevated as it was before. And there was a sense of calm, not urgency, from the White House personnel traveling with the president on a trip out in California. The president was informed about the outages. He is not, we are told at this point, canceling a fundraiser planned for tonight. And the Chief of Staff, Andrew Card, is handling issues at the White House because Vice President Dick Cheney is also out of Washington, D.C. on vacation. Power went out after the markets closed, so that was a blessing in some sense. The Treasury Department here in Washington says because of that, the shutdown of the market participants and exchanges today was orderly and no financial data was lost. Dan?
Cheryl, you mentioned the president, and of course, every president travels. He happens to be in California. He was there from, made a speech. Most who heard it thought it was one of his better speeches at a Marine base there. But then tonight about this fundraising, political campaign fundraising dinner, is it your understanding or not that some consideration was given to the president canceling his appearance there, or was it from the beginning just listen, we're going to leave Andrew Card in charge at the White House and Vice President Cheney will stay on vacation and I, the president, will stay out here and do what I plan to do?
We don't have a lot of insight as to the discussions that they had at this point, but one could assume that if the cause of all of this had been something more nefarious, then I think you would have seen an entirely different scenario of response from the White House. As it stands, there seemed to be a sense of calm emitted from the White House personnel, as I said, that were traveling. Early on, they were kind of downplaying this until and unless they found that there was terrorism involved. And that may have been a very scripted and intentional message that they were trying to send. Not sure whether they ever considered canceling the fundraiser. It seems as though after the president was informed, business continued on as usual. And if we find out more, we'll be sure and let you know.
Well, Cheryl, one is reminded, and all of us who covered politics know, that mayors sometimes get voted out if snow clogs the streets or if a power outage lasts very long and perception is isn't handled very well. On the other hand, in federal office, it doesn't quite work that way. But we take your point that the White House, with Andrew Card, a very experienced public servant, not an elective officer, very experienced public servant, is the point man on this particular problem. And emphasizing once again, here are things that if you're saying to yourself, well, if you're in the affected area here in the Northeast, what can I do? First of all, stay calm. Beware of rumors of any kind. Be prepared for this to last perhaps longer than expected. We all hope that the power will be back on fairly soon. There's some encouraging signs in the West and Ohio where some of the power is coming back on. But be prepared just in case it doesn't. Take the advice of those with the power companies who say it's not a bad idea. In fact, it's a good idea to unplug your main electrical appliances. The reason being, when the power finally comes back on, sometimes there are power surges, and that can cause your microwave or certainly your television set to take severe damage. So just unplug those appliances. You can also help by turning off the light switches. The reason being, then again, when power comes back on, not everybody's lights come on all at once, with the possibility of causing yet another shutdown. These are things you can do, but the central thing is just steady as we go. This is an inconvenience in case of people in hospitals and some other situations, maybe even dangerous, but for most people it's a kind of summer storm, a storm of blackouts, the power going out. And if it stays out, if it should stay out for as much as 25 hours, as it did in 1977, well, the attitude can prevail. We'll just get through that if we have to. And as of right now, the expectation is that for most, if not all, people in the Northeast are not going to have to go through power outages for anything approaching that length of time, although it may take more than just a couple of hours in many cases to get the power back on. With us now is Mr. Ralph DiNicola, Director of Public Relations of the First Energy Company in Akron, Ohio. He's on the phone. Thank you very much for being with us. What progress is being made to resume power there?
Well, we're taking a very systematic approach to service restoration right now. We are isolating our system from the neighboring companies that we're connected to. We're in the process of connecting transmission to 6 of our power plants that were knocked out by the cascading effect of this outage. And the next step would be, once we restore those power plants, is to bring up our largest transmission lines first, our 345,000 volt lines, then down to our 138,000 volt lines. And then that would bring up the service areas to the neighborhoods and the communities. So we, as the chairman pointed out, we have made some progress. We've brought some customers back into service, but we have to take a very careful approach to this so that we don't suffer secondary outages.
Good point. I have to be cautious because you don't want secondary outages. Now, is it true or untrue that people can help you in taking that precaution by going around and turning off the light switches and turning off the electrical switches because if they have no power now, and if power comes back on, you don't want everybody's lights, all their power to go back on at once because there could be a secondary effect.
No question about it. Anybody without power should turn off their major appliances because fluctuating voltage could affect those appliances, and you could get a big spike of demand, which could cause a secondary outage, just as you point out.
Now, should businesses open tomorrow, or should everyone figure on taking a 3-day weekend?
Well, that's certainly going to be the call of our customers, but we're looking at something that it's a little too early to predict that it could take a day or two to get everybody back on, but as the chairman pointed out, we are making progress. We've got portions of the Akron area, Toledo area, and a number of other northern Ohio communities coming back into service, but the major restoration will come after the power plants are back on. You have to have enough power plants to match customer demand in order to restore the system.
Now, I'm keeping in mind that some of the nuclear power plants in Ohio, at least one, correct me if I'm wrong, maybe as many as 2, shut down
right.
because their electrical power was not available. That's a big factor, is it not?
Yes, the Perry plant shut down, and we're in the process of restoring station power there now. It was one of the 6 plants affected.
Now, there in Akron and in Ohio, you are, correct me if I'm wrong here, Mr. DeNicola, on the western edge, or at least the western portion of this problem. Is it or is it not reasonable to expect that once major sources of power begin to come on in a widespread way in that western section, it may indeed take longer in the eastern section, say New York, Albany, Hartford, for the power to come on, or is that too much to extrapolate from what you said?
Well, we're a little early in it, but the goal here is to isolate our system, get our system back up and running, and then tie it back into the grid, and hopefully that'll be a process that helps the New York area.
And do you have any further information on what caused this? Not necessarily where, but what caused this?
Well, it's too early for us to tell. We're hearing the same reports that have played nationally, that there could have been a situation that occurred in the east, and that had the cascading effect that came through our system and at least the Detroit area, and maybe perhaps further west.
Nicola, I really appreciate your patience with it, but explain to us in as simple layman language as you can what you mean, what we mean when we say, well, this wasn't terrorism, that something went wrong in the system and there was a, quote, cascading effect. What does that mean?
Well, what that means, the good part of our system is that it's interconnected so we can move power across the country, or around regions at least, to enhance reliability. If a particular system has a problem, we can move power in. But the bad part is that if there is a significant event, like appeared in the east, we believe, that can affect neighboring systems.
Now, is this a flaw in the system?
Well, I wouldn't say it's a flaw. The system has to be interconnected in order for it to be reliable. So we're just going to have to work our way through restoration, and then certainly there will be an opportunity to identify exactly what happened and whether some changes can be made to improve that system in the future.
We thank you very much for being with us. If any news breaks out there, call us, collect. Otherwise, we'll be back in touch with you as we go along. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Pei Chang with our Hartford CBS News affiliate is at a train station in New Haven, Connecticut. Hazy, is power coming back on in any way there?
The latest numbers coming into the newsroom indicate that around 16,000 homes are starting to get power back along the Connecticut coastline. Now, throughout the entire state, there are just under 200,000 people without power at this time. The hardest hit county is Fairfield County, where about 80,000 homes are without electricity. Now, the biggest concern here at Union Station are the hundreds of people who take the train from New Haven into New York and also points in between. Right now, they are stranded somewhere in between those 2 points. Why? Because the Metro-North Railroad tells us that that overhead power line connecting New York to New Haven is completely dead. So what they're doing right now, according to the Department of Transportation, is they're sending diesel-fueled trains out over to the Metro-North Railroads, and they're going to tow them in and rescue rescue all those people who are stranded on those hot, air-conditioned-less cars and bring them back here to Union Station. You can see over here that there are tons of cars parked, and also these taxi cabs, they've been waiting here for hours. They're not getting a lot of business because hardly anybody is coming into Union Station because of this massive power outage. Another alternative that people are seeking is that they're hopping onto buses. You've seen a lot of that here, a lot of bus traffic, more than usual, and all those people are heading away. Now here in New Haven, Yale New Haven Hospital is a world-class medical facility. We are told that the lights are flickering in that hospital. They do have a backup generator, although officials say they don't know how long that can last them. Live in New Haven, Paisley Chang, CBS News. Back to you, Dan.
Thank you very much for that report from New Haven. CBS News correspondent Jim Axelrod is in New York City's Columbus Circle now with an update on the situation in the streets, on the ground here in New York City.
There's limited communications here in the tri-state area.
If New York City is not completely paralyzed tonight, the going couldn't be much slower. With no power at rush hour and the police stretched thin enough at points that pedestrians are directing traffic, it's massive gridlock.
Cell phone's not working, telephone's not working. It's like you're in the wilderness, you know? And this is New York City.
At this point, it's suspected a power plant problem in Buffalo shut down power in the New York City metropolitan area and up the eastern seaboard into Canada, as far west as Detroit.
You can see the gridlock on all the downtown streets here.
This is what Cleveland looked like, where power was out as far as Akron, hospitals on backup generators, and the train to the suburbs were down. Underground in New York City, in the subways, alarms sounded and people were pulled to safety.
The lights started blinking, the train stopped. Then all of a sudden all the lights went on. They told us it was the AC failure, then they told us it was the DC failure, and then they told us it was the citywide failure. People started to panic, you know, like we couldn't breathe.
With the 7 million people who use the subways in New York needing to find another way home, the streets and sidewalks quickly jammed with people walking across bridges and out of Manhattan in a state of confusion.
Just kind of like all these other people, just looking around, don't know what's going on, don't know what happened.
The last time New Yorkers saw pictures like these was the first thought on many minds.
It's creepy. I'm getting a flashback from September 11th. I don't like this.
I mean, the first thing that hit me was 9/11. I thought something was wrong. I got a little nervous.
But fairly quickly, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission said it was not terrorism, and the mayor of New York agreed.
We have a careful plan which we've rehearsed and practiced to deal with exactly this emergency, and as of this moment, virtually everything that we had expected to be able to do, we have done.
Of course, the number one question at this point, when is the power going to come back on? Of course, that has to do with what part of the Northeast we're talking about. There are reports that in some parts of Ohio and Connecticut, the power is back on. The mayor of New York is talking about 4 or 5 hours. The man who runs the utility, the power company in Detroit, is saying even longer, perhaps into tomorrow morning. But Dan, at this point, everyone is talking about hours until power was restored, not days. Dan?
Jim Axelrod, rush hour basically is over, but this is an unusual day. Are there still massive amounts of people on the street, or is it beginning to thin out a bit now?
Well, here at 7:25 or so on the East Coast, I'd say rush hour in Manhattan is still in full swing. However, instead of cars, we're talking about mostly foot traffic. People you can see behind me walking up and down. We're in Columbus Circle right now, kind of a crossroads of the city, and there's just, as far as you can see all the way down 8th Avenue here, people coming up. So I think today rush hour is going to extend a little longer than even the New York City's long rush hour usually does. Dan?
Jim Axelrod reporting live from the streets of New York. And as for the question that Jim said is on everybody's lips, well, when's the power going to come back on? The straight answer is nobody knows. And while it's true that in some areas it's spotty, very spotty, and so far mostly in the western part of the affected area here in the Northeast United States, some power's coming on, some will begin to come on in Connecticut, that this is overall and in the main, relatively minor so far. It's promising, but it's still likely to be a matter of hours, not minutes, before most people, particularly in the larger metropolitan areas, New York, Cleveland, Detroit, for that matter, Toronto and Ottawa, have power. And if the past is prologue, it could, please mark the word, be longer than that. August 11th, 1996. Electricity went out. It affected 4 to 5 million people in 9 states. It was one of the most severe outages in U.S. history, and it lasted, by some estimates, as many as 7 hours. Others said 4 hours. A blackout in New York City in 1977 left about 9 million people without electricity for up to 25 hours. So we'll see how it goes. Nobody knows when it's going to come back on. Let's go live to Governor McGree, who's addressing. Governor McGree of New Jersey is talking live. Let's pick him up.
Power is returning. We anticipate that power will return first, most probably to Essex, Essex and Hudson counties, and Union counties, Bergen and Passaic later on.